Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Jack Hannam, and I'm the current president of the British Society of Soil Science. And I'm really delighted to welcome you all here to our fifth webinar of the year. Before I welcome our two presenters, I'd just like to introduce briefly the British Society of Soil Science as we're hosts of today's webinar. We're an established international membership organisation and charity committed to the study of soil in its widest aspects. And we bring together all of those working with soils, both within academia, and we have a growing membership of practitioners who are implementing soil science in practice and industry. And we also welcome anybody to become a member who has a keen interest in soils. We plan to host 10 webinars in total during 2024, so do keep an eye out on our website for further webinars throughout the year. And just before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. There's lots of you here today. Welcome, thanks very much. All of your microphones, therefore, have been muted. And we will be taking questions right at the end of the presentation, so after both of our presenters have spoken. But we will be monitoring these throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions as they come up, do type them in the questions tab and we'll get back to those at the end of the webinar. So do make sure you get your questions in by 12:50. So we've got roughly 10 minutes to go through as many as we can at the end. There is a raise your hand button, but unless the presenters specifically ask us for that, we won't be using that. And just to remind everybody, today's presentation also has been awarded BASIS and NRASO TPD points. And so if you're registered with either of these organisations, do contact us directly after the event. And as you're probably aware, we are recording today's presentation and this will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel. Okay, so enough introductions from me. I'd really like to introduce our first presenter today. So we've got a really exciting seminar on soil carbon sequestration today. And I'd like to welcome Professor Pete Smith. He's Professor of Soils and Global Climate Change at the Institute of Biological and Environmental Sciences at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, in the UK. And he's also Science Director for the Scottish Climate Change Centre of Expertise, or otherwise known as ClimateXChange. And his interests include climate change mitigation, soils, agriculture, food systems, ecosystem services modelling, and nature-based solutions. He has a whole string of fellows, and he's Fellow of the Royal Society of Biology, Fellow of the Institute of Soil Scientists, the Royal Society of Edinburgh, a Foreign Fellow of the Indian National Science Academy, and a Fellow of the European Science Academy, and finally a Fellow of the Royal Society of London, and also a jolly good Fellow as well. So thank you very much, Pete. Amazing accolades and really looking forward to your talk. So over to you.
Thanks, Jack. I'm going to try and share my screen. I just clicked the button, so hopefully you can see.
Yep.
Can you see my screen, Jack?
That's perfect. That's in presenter. That's in the full screen mode.
Brilliant.
So away you go. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So before Jagadeesh gets into the details, I'm just going to give an overview of soil carbon sequestration, the sort of global potential, the opportunities for soil carbon sequestration, but also some of the limitations. So first of all, soil organic carbon sequestration is a feasible option and its potential is large. So when we look at the numbers, if we add up the technical potential for doing soil carbon sequestration all over the world, we see a technical potential of about 5 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year. And to put that in perspective, annual emissions of greenhouse gases are about 50 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year. So that's about 10% of our annual emissions. But that's just the technical potential. If we look at the economic potential, so that's the amount that could be the amount of carbon sequestration that could be realized at reasonable carbon costs, that brings it down to about 1.5 to 3 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year. So not as high as the technical potential, but still not to be sniffed at. It's still in the gigaton potential if we can realize the carbon sequestration potential that's out there. And what's shown below these numbers is just a little graph showing the different ways that we get to these estimates. You can either have, at the bottom right hand corner, you can see that options that have very large emission reduction or sequestration potential, but don't cover very large areas. So on the bottom we have, along the x-axis, we have the greenhouse gas emission reduction potential, or the mitigation potential. And on the y-axis, we have the number of millions of hectares that an area can be applied. So there isn't such a large area of histosols or peatlands to be restored, but the carbon sequestration potential or emissions reduction potential is very large. So that's why this one appears over here on the right. And there's maybe about a gigaton or a petagram of CO2 equivalents per year that could be realised from restoring all of our degraded peatlands. Over on the over to the top left of the corner, we have the options that perhaps have less per area mitigation potential, maybe in the region of less than 1 tonne of carbon dioxide equivalents per hectare per year. And these are things like enhancing root phenotypes, cropland management and grazing management. But because they cover such vast areas of the planet, even though they've got a smaller per area potential, these also add up to significant numbers. So between 0.3 and about 1.5 gigatons or petagrams of CO2 equivalents per year. So when we add all these numbers together, this is how we arrive at the technical potentials that are shown at the top of the slide. And we know that we can do this. This was published in a paper in Nature in about 2015. We can do this by following this sort of flow chart. So if we've got degraded or marginal land, we can convert it to perennial vegetation. If it's been drained or cropped, we can restore it to wetlands. If it's got nutrient deficiency, we can add nutrients, lime, or grow N-fixing species. And we go through this flow chart, which gives you a range of options, some of which require land use change, either conversion of the land. But as we go further down, this is all keeping the land management the same as it is. Sorry, keeping the land use the same as it is, but improving the land management. So there are a range of options. In fact, when we've reviewed this, there are over 100 options to increase carbon sequestration potential or reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. So there are a lot of options out there, mainly on croplands, but also some in our grasslands and other in the other managed ecosystem. And also, we don't just restore our soil organic matter or our soil carbon for climate change. It's quite easy to look at this through climate change blinkers. And that's often the case, given that there are carbon markets out there and lots of people are trying to exploit the benefits of carbon sequestration on the voluntary carbon markets. But we also have to remember that this is maybe only a co-benefit of doing it for many other reasons. We want to increase our organic matter to improve soil fertility, to improve the workability, soil water holding capacity, resistance to drought, etc., and also improving yields. So when we look at it, look at soil carbon sequestration, this is the pizza diagram, as we call it. You can see that in the middle we have soil carbon sequestration. The inner ring of the pizza shows the functions, the soil functions that are supported by soil carbon sequestration. So there are 7 functions there. For example, acting as a carbon pool is number 6. 3 is acting as biodiversity pool. Number 1 is for enhancing biomass production, including agriculture and forestry. But there are 7 functions there. Those 7 functions, we can look at how they map onto ecosystem services or nature's contributions to people. So there are 18 nature's contributions to people, another way of saying ecosystem services, in the middle ring of the pizza. And what you can see there is that the majority of those 18 nature's contributions to people are supported by different soil functions. So the little orange dots you can see in the middle ring of the pizza are those soil functions that contribute to supporting that nature's contribution to people. So if we look at number 1, habitat creation and maintenance, that is supported by soil functions numbers 2 and 3, for example. And we can go one step further and we can see how those nature's contributions to people support the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is shown in the outer ring of the pizza. So there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And what we show here is the ones that are contributed to by soil carbon sequestration. And what you can see, the little dots, the little circles in the outside ring. So let's have a look at, for example, end hunger, which is Sustainable Development Goal number 2. That's supported by a number of nature's contributions to people, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 17. And each one of those are supported from the inner ring back to the soil functions. So this is a way of mapping the support for the soil functions through the ecosystem services to the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can see that there are beneficial impacts of soil carbon sequestration to a whole range of ecosystem services and to support the majority, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it shows that we're not increasing the soil organic matter just for climate. It's easy to think of it like that, but we're actually doing it for a whole range of reasons. And any one of those reasons is a good reason to increase the soil organic matter in the soil. But it's not a panacea. So we have to be aware of some of the limitations. So if it's so great, we'd just use soil carbon sequestration everywhere. And there have been some suggestions that it could offset a large proportion of the greenhouse gas emissions that we emit. But I'd say beware of those claims, the over claims for soil carbon sequestration, because there are some limitations associated with this, which make it a lot less attractive than reducing the greenhouse gases that we must do from every sector of the economy if we're to meet net zero. So soil carbon sequestration can help us, but it's not the answer to our problems. The answer to our problem must come from immediate and aggressive reduction in our greenhouse gas emission in all sectors of the economy. The first limitation is that we have saturation of the soil carbon pool. So there's only so much that you can increase the soil carbon. You can't increase it year on year on year, except in peatlands, which can continue to increase in soil carbon indefinitely because they build up new layers. But generally speaking, in mineral soils, that can't happen. So what happens when you get a management change? This is an example from using real data from Rothamsted and using the Rothamsted carbon model. In the first few years after a management change, for example, this could be converting croplands to grasslands, or it could be improving the management of croplands. What you get is in the first, say, 5-year or a 10-year period, you get this large increase in soil carbon. In the second 5-year period, that increase is smaller. In the third 5 or 10-year period, that's even smaller, until we get to this new equilibrium position, after which we no longer get any increase in soil carbon, despite the fact that we're maintaining this improved management practice. So there's diminishing returns, and the carbon sequestration potential is time limited. We only get the benefit for maybe 20 to 100 years, and that sink strength declines as we get towards the new equilibrium position. So compared to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which give us a non-time limited reduction in the climate warming potential, carbon sequestration only acts over a 20 to 100 year time period, but it can be useful for getting us to net zero over the next 30 years as we try to meet net zero by mid-century. The other issue is non-permanence or reversibility. So if we have a management change, and again, this is some data that's shown here from Rothamsted, the management change was implemented. These are real data from Geese Crop Wilderness and projections forward using the Rothamsted carbon model. This is looking at a manure treatment on a cropland shown in red, and woodland conversion of a cropland in around about the 1870s, shown in blue. And what you can see is that there is an increase in soil carbon, which continues to increase. But then what we've done is we've converted that back to a low input cropland to see what would happen in the future. And you can see that you rapidly lose that soil carbon, and that can be lost, and that will eventually go back to the levels that it was at if it's converted back to a low input cropland. So you have this reversibility issue, and it's not only management change that leads to this reversibility, it's also issues of extreme weather, droughts, floods, fire, and such like, which could cause these problems. So with the increasing incidents and extremities of extreme events, soil carbon sequestration or soil carbon sinks could be under threat in the future, and subject to potential reversibility. And the other thing is we have to look out for leakage or displacement. Are we sequestering carbon or just moving it about? Now, we could take a farm over here with lots of manure, and we got a farm. We could add some of that manure to the other area. And if we're only measuring the farm that we're putting the manure on, if we just measure the increase in soil carbon there, we might be removing the manure that we're applying to other fields, and it could be declining there. So when we have a look over the whole cropland area, the increase in one field could be balanced out by a decrease in another area, and we could have a net change in soil carbon sequestration of 0. So this is just one example of leakage or displacement, and others are involved, for example, with land use change. So we also have to look out for leakage and displacement. So the three potential problems or potential drawbacks of soil carbon sequestration, although it's a great thing to do, it has many co-benefits, is it's time limited because of saturation, it's potentially reversible through land management change or through extreme events, and there's potential of leakage or displacement, which means that it's really important to monitor, report and verify the soil carbon changes that you've got, not just in the field that you're claiming the credit for, but also across the landscape scale. But we can scale up soil carbon sequestration if we have suitable monitoring, reporting and verification. And this is something that Jagadeesh is going to talk about in his presentation that follows mine. So I'm not going to spend ages on it. But we do have, this was a paper that was published in 2020, which was looking at the different components of a soil monitoring and verification and reporting system that are already in existence that we could bring together to form an adequate monitoring, reporting and verification system for soil carbon. So it involves long-term experiments and benchmark sites, which we have, short-term experiments such as flux measurements, which we also have, networks of those. It involves soil organic carbon or greenhouse gas models, which we also have, which can be tested against the data and verified. They can be upscaled using spatial data. We collect activity data at the farm scale, which is already being collected by farmers for their single farm payment. And we also have repeat sampling on survey grids, such as those undertaken in England and Scotland and many areas of the world through soil surveys. And we can also use remote sensing. But the majority of this is going to be covered in much greater detail by Jagadeesh. So this is just an appetizer for Jagadeesh's talk, and he's going to be talking much more about that later. So thank you for your attention. I'll leave it there and hand over to Jagadeesh, who can talk more about the monitoring, reporting and verification issues.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that really great overview, Pete. As you can see, it's not a silver bullet with soil carbon sequestration. So we've got loads of questions already. Thanks very much for those who've already put the questions into the questions tab. Do continue to add those there. And please add them as our next speaker is also presenting as well. So thanks very much, Pete. And on to our next presenter. Pete did a very good job at introducing some of the stuff that you're going to cover. But I'd just like to introduce our second speaker today for soil carbon sequestration, and this is Dr. Jagadeesh Yeluripati, and he's a senior scientist at the James Hutton Institute. So great to have another speaker from Scotland. Dr. Jagadeesh is a senior scientist who leads the Human and Environmental Modelling Group and the Information and Computational Sciences Department at the James Hutton Institute. And he's got a background in environmental sciences and engineering. And over the past 15 years, he's been conducting interdisciplinary research on impact of climate change on different production systems, especially agricultural systems in several countries. And his research primarily focuses on modelling and the role of soil in global carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. He's published over 60 peer-reviewed articles and currently serves as an associate editor for the Journal of Climate Smart Food Systems. And he's involved in multiple projects, including the EU Aranet Sense project, which involves 8 countries, NERC-funded Retina project, which is developing a digital MRV system. So I guess we're going to hear a little bit more about that later. And he's also involved in a number of Scottish government-funded projects through the RESAS programme. He's also a founder of a spin-out company called Carbon Extras. So that's it for my introduction, and I'm really excited to hear about your work on MRV. So over to you, Jagadeesh. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for a nice introduction, and also thanks for inviting me to this present our research. Yeah, to present our research to a very important audience. Are you able to see my slides?
Yep, slides full screen, so away you go. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So Pete already introduced about the soil carbon sequestration and presented already the potential of it. But as he mentioned, it's very important to have a MRV system that will really verify the amount of carbon that is sequestered in the soil. So this is one of the projects we just recently completed, and we are pursuing this further with support from other funding agencies, this work. I'm going to present this work in this, and this is all about near real-time monitoring MRV system. And today I will talk about a bit of background. Being in Scotland, it is more in the context of Scotland, and also what is the need for MRV, and also present a conceptual framework for the MRV, and also show you a prototype we came up with. And we are trying to scale up this prototype in the near future. The work is ongoing. So whatever I am presenting is a very primitive prototype at this point. So just to provide a context to this, as we all know, the greenhouse gas emissions, in Scotland, actually, the agriculture is the 3rd biggest emitter by 2019, but by 2021, it moved to the 2nd place because a lot of investment was going into other sectors, but very little progress was made in agriculture sector. If you see the extent of the reductions over a period of time, other sectors, especially the energy sector and business, and they have a lot of investment and they have significant reductions that are achieved over a period of time. But agriculture was lagging behind in all of them, even though agriculture has a huge potential, as Pete pointed out in his presentation. If we want to achieve net zero by 2050, all sectors must contribute to this to achieve the net zero. As you can see in the graph, actually, from 2018 to 2050, if we want to reach net zero, we need to have a substantial reduction in all sectors, and the extent of reductions are much more steep compared to the previous decades. So just to provide a background, the technical potential of carbon sequestration is very well known, and the estimates vary widely. Some of them were from 0.9 to 1.85 petagrams per carbon per year. But the complication here is how the soil organic carbon content and greenhouse gas emissions cannot be easily measured, which is a key barrier for implementing the programs to achieve the net zero. There is a need for credible and reliable MRV platform for national reporting, because the way that currently the system operates, the national reporting is done differently, the methods applied differently, and the local level, at the farm level, the methods are quite different. There is no alignment of these two methods. There's a lot of scope that we can unify these two and create a more integrated and centralized system. And also there is an emission trading is a big issue because of the lack of a reliable MRV system. And also if we want to progress towards the net zero, we need to monitor what's really happening in the field. So the main objective of the project we have that's called the Retina project is to create an iterative near real-time digital MRV system that will allow dynamic modeling forecasting of the crop year's emissions and net carbon sequestration at the farm level. In order to do that, we are trying to connect the data that is coming from the field in near real time with the models and predict the outcome and produce the outcome to the app, and also collect the information, what is happening in the field, and feedback into the system. I'll show you how that works in the next one. So this is the overall concept of the Retina project. We are trying to capture the data from the field at 3 different scales. At the plot scale, we are deploying a bunch of sensors. These are soil temperature, moisture, and weather we capture at the site level, at the plot level. And then at the landscape level, we deployed the equivariance measurement system. This is not necessarily because we just calibrate the models at certain sites. So that's what actually we deployed this one from. And also we are using drones to estimate the soil biomass for the crop and translate that information and feed that information to the models. And also we are integrated the existing soil, climate, and also the grassland, cropland management data, already existing information into the system. We brought all the integration into this and also feed into the high computing facility where we have a beacon system where different models are sitting. Currently, we have 3 different models, DDC models, Bhaskara model, and also the Equus model is integrated currently, so that we can predict the changes that is happening from 2020 to 2050 for each land parcel level. So even though we create a system, the issue comes in with the biophysical aspects we capture through the sensors. And also we are using remote sensing to monitor certain management aspects, especially the plowing. We are trying to process that information and also capture whether that particular land is plowed at any time or not. So this will all be feed into the models as it comes to the real-time data that comes in, we'll process it and feed into the models. But the missing link here is what is happening in the field, what management that is adapted. So that's the reason actually we are producing all the output into the app. And also we expect that we capture the management information through the app so that will feed back into the system. And also the models run iteratively. It's not one time. Whenever the new information comes, the models will run again and again and updating the information. This will change the way we operate that currently. So keeping that in mind, we developed a prototype system at this point for MRV system to track greenhouse gas emission, carbon reduction, to advise the farmers and growers to adopt best practice, which include an automated field operation monitoring and farm data integration and reporting and robust modeling and validation aspect of it. So how Retina works, we demonstrated in 2 different farms, which are both James Hutton farms located in Scotland, one in Dundee and one close to Aberdeen. And we deployed the sensors and created a Retina real-time dashboard. We collect the data and feed that information into real-time model runs and produce the output into the app. And we collect the information from the app and feedback into the model, iteratively run it and show that how that works. These are the 2 study sites, but this is the sensor deployment. We have lots of sensors we deployed in the field. We have sensors and gateways that will collect the data and that reach to our servers, integrated into our database, and then feed into the model. So this is site level data capture. We take the soil carbon stock information. Preferably, we ask the farmers to basically measure them, or if they have that information. Otherwise, we integrated the already existing soil carbon maps already. So we already have an existing information. So we feed into this if there is no information available. So we capture the management data through the app. If it is a grassland, this is a planting, fertilization, grass cut, and other information harvest. But in the cropland, we have the whole events of it. will collect it into this. Currently, the retina models have 3 models, as I mentioned before: DDC model, Echoes, and Bhaskara. All 3 models simultaneously run and produce the results. So this is how the entire system works. We have the automated land parcel detection, and then we have a smart soil sampling. We advise where the soil sample needs to be taken. It is automated already. So we create a baseline we capture what is really happening on the baseline management. And real-time data comes from the sensors, and the mobile app will capture the management information, and then we'll produce the real-time, near real-time model predictions. And at this point, we are at this stage of the project where we are able to produce the results, but actually in future, we want to go for a tailor-made management option where we can look at various managements and come up with what is the best management for the highest carbon sequestration. We are not there yet, but these models can produce that information. We can process and advise the farmers which is the best management combination, which is a very tricky part, because even though we know several management practices that will lead to the carbon sequestration, but there is a combination that is very important, because that is the real potential to this. So after prediction, again, we'll monitor what is really happening to the field, the new management when it is implemented. So the additionality comes from the difference between the new management and the baseline management. That's what actually goes in the carbon farming aspect of it. So how this works, basically we collect the soil data, which is already integrated into the system, and climate data and eddy covariance data where we calibrate models at certain sites, and the management information. All will feed into the models and produce the output. We have a greenhouse gas emission, soil carbon change, crop yield, and analytic, and many more outputs. For each land parcel, we have a baseline model input data, which is created. When the new information comes in, we replace the existing information with the baseline models run, and each run will be curated in the system. So we can go back, it's highly traceable. Each run will be unique ID will be created. So we can go back and check what actually happened, what time, and we can verify it. And in the models are running iteratively and producing lots of information every time. And what are the benefits of this technology is that it's an iterative near real-time model predictions and complete data traceability it will offer. And also data collected directly from the field without input from the farmers. And also the real-time data-driven science bring more credibility and transparency into the carbon trade system currently. And the real-time data visualization from informed data at the farm level, because once the system knows that it's a system is plowed, then we can also simulate and show what is the impact, and immediately that produce into the app. This is what actually we are aiming to achieve at the end. And these are the tier 3 models instead of tier 2 factors. The major advantage of this is that when we apply tier 2 factors, this is quite at the regional scale, it's produce the same results, irrespective of the local conditions. Whereas if we apply the tier 3 models in a site-specific manner, more iteratively, we can offer more site-specific options and then provide more mitigation options to the farmers. And over a period of time, when we start running these models, they get better and better because over a period of time, because we can learn from what is there in the system. So whereas in current, the way the system operates, we apply the model at certain places, and then we apply in an unknown location, hoping that these models will perform better. Whereas here, we set up the system in each land parcel and run over a period of time. Even though predictions are not necessarily the best, but we can learn from it. We can do better and better as we go along. If the system runs for 2 years, 3 years timeline, the data comes in, will really tune the models and get better and better outcomes. And also these models are capable of producing lots of outputs, not only the greenhouse gas emission yields and many others. And that gives a lot of confidence into this. High quality soil and climate data access and integration, which is really makes it very powerful because we bring so many things together. And also sequestration, most important aspect is until 2050, if the same management is continued, how much extra carbon is sequestered is an important, valuable information for the farmers to make decisions. The current the systems, they don't offer that one. They presently give the information about what actually happening now, but actually what many of them interested is what happens if they continue with the same management, and a pay way for the digital twins once it is operational. So I will show you the prototype currently where we are and how the entire system works. So we already deployed the sensors in the field. We are getting the real-time data. So that is integrated to our app. And then the models will be running when the new information come in. So the stakeholders will be interacting only with the app at the end of the day. So this is where they have to register first. I will show you some of the features. It's having 3 elements. One is to set up, manage, and the informatics. So the setup system will allow you to register first, and the GPS will automatically locate the site. And they have to choose the farm type, arable, dairy, or whatever the one. So once they choose it, then they can set up the field. The GPS automatically located, and you can see that it's each land parcel. You can just need to pick. It will automatically identify the boundaries and give all the information, existing information behind it, because we have the soil type, texture, and all the information, and also the boundaries, land areas, everything. It is very easy. It takes hardly a few minutes to set up for the entire farm, their land. So they just need to click which land parcel it is, and it will automatically add all the calculations in the background. It does. So each one is with unique ID. The models will run in each land parcel. So currently the system is set up only for arable systems. So you can see that you can choose that. And if there is no the soil data is already integrated into it, climate data is integrated into it already into the system. And if the farmer has not taken the soil samples, we advise the farmers where to take the soil sample. So they just need to select where they want to, which land parcel they want to take the sample, and the system automatically generates the locations of it, and also guide the farmers exactly where to take the sample. It will show you the numbers here. It takes a few minutes, but it will generate the soil sample. The soil samples are generated based on an algorithm in the background, considering the elevation and the heterogeneity of the information we have in the background. So these are the locations of this one. Each land parcel will have 15 locations. And the sample, these are the areas where they need to take the sample and submit to the system. Once the system, the database will keep all the information. And in the, you can go into that. And this is the information actually they can see as the system grows. And also they can see the soil carbon stocks. They can look into it, and they click on the land parcel. They can see the soil carbon stocks. You can see 0 to 30, 30 to 100. This is actually what already in our database. So this is, and soil map is already integrated. They can see soil carbon distribution with the existing maps already. So, and we can update this information as new information come in a more site-specific manner. So you can click on any of them. They can get the basic information. I click on any land parcel. Automatically that gives the topsoil carbon, how much it is, with the existing pH and nitrogen content and all of the information. This is the map distribution of soil organic carbon. They can see. They can choose this one. So this is what about the first phase where they submit the information, the setup. This is where actually comes in the manage part of it. Once they want to submit the management information, they need to look at which land parcel they're submitting the information. We are trying now to bypass this one because most of the many of the farmers, they're using the management software. Many management software, proprietary management software. We are trying to write an API so that we can grab all the information automatically. So this is once they can submit the information, they can see their management, what is happening into the field. This is the spring barley and all different managements that are. So you can see the my activity. They just need to tap on which land parcel they're submitting the information to, what is the date here, and then select the crop. We have a huge number of crops they can select, and also they select the activities, what they're doing really. Are they going plowing, manure application, and fertilizer application? What actually they're doing, how much they are doing, if they are harvesting, how much, when they're harvesting. So once they submit this information, we know that what is happening in the field, and that will feed into the system. And this where we deployed the sensors, they can see the sensor data in the app itself. And this information can be processed and used for many other purposes, which we are looking at how the farmers can use the sensor data for other activities into this. So now the informatic analytics, where the forecast or the model predictions are coming. So we are improving this interface. This is a very old one in the prototype, but this is a greenhouse gas emission until 2050 if the same management is continued. So we are still improving it, the models running in the background. So every time the model runs iteratively once the new information comes in. So this will create a iterative system that will make it powerful and keep the information and secure the information over a period of time. So, and it will solve many issues. We can, for each land parcel, we have a database in the background, and we can see the change, what is happening. If there's a decline in the carbon or increase in the carbon, we can track it, and we can predict the greenhouse gas emission. And also we can reduce the sampling frequency. The way we are using is, now we have the soil carbon with the real-time data that is coming in. We can predict the soil carbon, significant soil carbon increase maybe in 6 years, 7 years. Otherwise, the current protocol is every 5 years you need to do it, sampling, which may be a waste of money, because we can say that maybe in 7 years timeline, you can see, because you don't see any significant change, given the biophysical conditions, you can't see the change. So that way we can also save the money at the unnecessary frequent sampling. So, and also we can predict how the soil carbon is. Even our predictions are wrong in the short term, it gets better and better, because we'll be securing the information and also tuning the models as we go along for each and every site. So that makes it really powerful, the system. So this is where actually we tested in some of the places in Balloderry, in Dundee. We are still testing in lots of locations. So these are the yield predictions from the DNDC model. Some are relatively convincing. Some places we go wrong, but we'll still calibrating and getting better as we apply more and more into this. So in conclusion, as I presented, the framework presents in this study offer a promising approach in developing a credible, more MRV and near real-time multi-stream, bringing all the multi-stream data and models. And the continuous improvement in data collection and model refinement will further enhance the framework accuracy and reliability. Digital data collected and generated in this project will have a long-lasting value to the soil, carbon, and nitrogen, and global greenhouse gas emission measurement and modeling communities. And this approach will enable the data flow from the field to the end user to help the real-time decision making. So this, as I showed you in the prototype, then what we are testing at this point is that when the management event happens in the field, whether we can offer the immediately what is the impact of in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and its likely impact on the soil carbon as soon as possible to the farmer, so that will be invaluable information that will also bring a change in the behavior. So these are all various things we are doing, and we are the minimum viable product is the next step for us. Which we are planning to produce very soon. We are in the process of producing the MVP in the next step. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jagadeesh. Absolutely fascinating project, Retina. So there's been loads of questions coming in, as you can probably imagine. But yeah, thanks both of you. So those excellent overviews. So I'm going to hand over. We've got around about 15 minutes or just under for some questions. There's quite a few that have come through. So I will start off. So there's one going back to Pete's talk, I guess, sort of about setting the scene really, and the graph that you showed on the carbon saturation limit. So there's a question about, could you comment on, there's been some recent literature that suggests that the particulate organic matter accrual has no limit, even if the mineral associated organic matter does. And so is that positive news then for carbon sequestration in the long term? So over to you, Pete.
Yeah, that's really interesting finding, and that's why I tried not to use the term saturation. I tried to use the word equilibrium, because saturation implies something very fine, very, very definite, that can only get up to that level and never go any higher. But if we look at total carbon, total soil carbon, you do get those. If we look at all those long-term experiments at Rothamsted and from all over the world in the soil organic matter network, they do sort of tend to asymptote at some point. So even if we are getting some change in the some increase in the particular organic matter rather than the mineral associated, the evidence, the long-term evidence suggests that we do get this equilibrium. So I'm very interested in it, and obviously I'm not wedded to the idea of saturation, and we have to continue pushing the boundaries of science. And we've seen examples where our hypotheses and our understanding change as we go into the future. But extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, and I'm yet to be persuaded that this will have a big impact over the long term. I don't see it acting as a it's not a persuasive argument yet that we can just keep increasing soil carbon year on year on year on year with no limits. I think that would be wishful thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, about how, this is the curious thing about how hypotheses and things change. I mean, those long-term experiments are really key to us really understanding, that change over decades, and but yeah, that they are limited in terms of the sites and the soils that they represent, aren't they? So yeah, that's really interesting. Inevitably, there's going to be a question about carbon markets, which you touched on, which is very relevant, obviously, to both of your talks. So I'm probably going to smoosh a couple of questions together. So one of them is thinking about, the value of these sorts of things, and do you think it's better to potentially in these carbon markets to emphasize the benefits of, as you demonstrated, Pete, in your presentation, of increasing soil carbon on other things, such as other soil functions in those SDGs? That might be quite a quick one to answer. And the other one linked to that, I'll ask the second part, which is about more, perhaps this is maybe for Jagadeesh, a bit more about, curious to know whether the carbon markets in terms of the MRV, are they comfortable with using this sort of modelling approach, or are they insisting on just purely sort of ground measurements? So both of you can answer both of those, but over to Pete first, I think, for the
I'll take the first one, and I'll let Jagadeesh answer the second one. So the first one is the carbon markets. There's lots of reasons, as I said, for increasing the soil organic matter in the soil. There are so many co-benefits. It delivers to so many different things. That I think, there's lots of reasons for doing it, but there is finance available from the carbon markets. So if farmers could get the benefit of doing that, then I don't see any reason why we shouldn't use the carbon markets to finance those changes that need to be made, because there can be some costs associated. For example, if you go to zero till, you need new direct drilling equipment, etc. So there is an investment needed by the farmer. Having said that, I think we have to be aware, because I think there are lots of middlemen or middle people potentially taking advantage of farmers and asking them to, persuading them that there's an unlimited potential for carbon sequestration, and the farmers won't necessarily see the benefits. Most of those credits will be creamed off by the companies in the middle. So I think the model with which farmers could get benefit is maybe by aggregating, because by themselves they're too small. But if they got together in big collectives and made sure that the money came back to them as the people who are actually implementing the practice, then I think that would be a good way of attracting money into the sector. So as long as we're in control, as long as the farmers are in control of that, and we're not just selling all of our future carbon credits to to middlemen and money makers, then I think, or middle people and money makers, then I think that's the key. But yeah, let's accept the money, but let's make sure that it goes to the right people.
Yeah. So yeah, we're creating cooperatives in a way, isn't it, really? So for these sorts of markets, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks, Pete. Jagadeesh, did you want to comment on the appetite potentially for these people that are developing these products for using models or not, or yeah?
Yeah, I think there is no option at this point not to use models, because the measurement is only for soil carbon they are measuring. But in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, they have to depend on models, because that's very complex and very difficult to monitor. So soil carbon, now there are many methods, cheap methods are developing, and also they're able to produce the baseline better than before. That is improving, but there is not much progress in terms of greenhouse gas emission measurement. So the modeling is the key to this. I don't say one approach or other. Actually, the combination is very important, both modeling and measurement, as I presented in my MRE system, where we are relying on tuning the models, the data that comes from the field. So that means we need both monitoring and also the modeling, and that learn from each other. That interaction is very crucial. The other aspect is that in terms of carbon markets, the way the carbon markets are operating now is more decentralized manner. The system I have presented here, it will centralize it. Because if we have a centralized system, we have a bunch of models, everybody is using that, then the auditing will be easier and the quality control will be easier. So now the issue comes when is the auditing and the quality control is the biggest challenge in the market, because everybody have a different tools, different outcomes that will create a problem. So I think that's the process we are going through. I think at some point they will all converge.
Yeah, those are really important points, aren't they? So, everyone has their pet model or way they want to account, or, so you can come up with all sorts of different numbers. We've seen that in various other sectors as well. But that's really important. I think, one of those steps is exactly like you say, kind of getting the science right and things, but actually then having some kind of standard or baseline that people are working towards. So, yeah, that's really important. I think linked to this, some other questions about the modelling actually linked to that. Is about the always the modelling question, begins with a U, but how do you account for these sort of uncertainties, particularly in a lot of these things you're measuring, extremely complicated systems, very variable. I know this is just a prototype system at the moment, but you're thinking about that. How do you kind of account for the uncertainties in the different types of data that you're collecting, and also with the modelling outputs as well in the system?
Yeah. Uncertainties will be substantially reduced because we are directly collecting the data from the field. That is a substantial improvement compared to before the methods how they are using currently. And also, we are also responding to the conceptual uncertainty, because we are not using one sort of model. We are trying to use, even we can bring in more models into the future into the system. So we can have a multiple models. And also, we can have a benchmark where the models need to demonstrate how they can perform in those. Then only those will be brought into the system. And then we can also quantify the uncertainty associated with the models. What I can say is that initially uncertainty will be high, but if we run in a site-specific manner over a period of time, I think we can substantially reduce the uncertainty. That's the whole effort here, what we are trying to do, because the uncertainty will be huge if you don't have any information about the field. And if you have information about over a period of time, several years, 4 years, 5 years time, if you start running the system, then will be substantially reduced uncertainty.
Yeah, it's an iterative thing, isn't it, really? So yeah, there's always the question about uncertainty. I've got it's a question actually linked to kind of like the measurements. So there's been some questions around the sensors and things like this. So in terms of these, what are these sort of outlays or costs for this? So it's quite intensive in terms, so it's not just there's sampling, there's also sensors. These are all quite expensive things. So could you give an idea of the sort of outlay of the cost, and whether this is something that is scalable, if you like, to for different farmers. Yeah.
So our idea initially, as I told you, as a concept, is to come up with a reliable MRV system, but it's not necessarily financially viable at this point. Yeah. So the idea is, because there is a huge range of sensors available in the market, which we are testing, many of them. Some of them are very cheap, some are very expensive. For this particular project, we used very expensive ones because it's a research project at the end of the day. So, but we are also testing now very cheap sensors with high density. There are two options. You can go for high, very expensive sensors with a low density, whereas very cheap sensors with high density. So we don't know the outcome. We are still testing where is the optimum here. But there are lots of options currently in the market for the cheap sensors. Even we can get the sensor for 50 pounds to 100 pounds to what we are using is 1,000 pounds. So that's not viable if we scale it up. But the idea here is we don't want to deploy sensors in every location. The whole idea is if we have a farm, we are trying to identify the piece of land which is more representative to it. So that's what the algorithm we are trying to develop. And then we deploy the sensors only in that particular land so that we can capture the variability within the land parcel we have selected. So that is the idea we are going ahead with. So we don't deploy sensors everywhere. We deploy a representative land parcel within the selected land parcel.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see your results actually from the comparison between the high density, low cost versus lots of that's talked about, but actually I haven't seen many studies really looking at that very closely. We've got millions of questions, so I'm going to finish on one because we need to finish at 1 o'clock. And actually kind of switching to grasslands, actually, obviously they hold a lot of soil organic carbon. So, we think going back to the kind of net zero story, what are your thoughts on storing more carbon in grasslands and the potential for further sequestration? I don't know if Pete, you want to take that one.
I'll take that one. Yeah, I'm very sceptical about the ability of grasslands, at least in this UK, to store more carbon, because they do contain large carbon stocks, as you mentioned, and because there is this sort of equilibrium position, they're already nearly at the top of their storage capacity. So unless you've really wrecked a grassland in the past, most grasslands contain quite a lot of carbon, and that's why I think people have frequently misunderstood. They said grasslands contain a lot of carbon, therefore they have annual sequestration that's very large. But in fact, it's related the other way around. If they already contain a lot of carbon, they're nearer the top of that curve, the asymptote, so there's not much storage capacity. So I think our greatest capacity for soil carbon storage is in our croplands, and by changing the management there, because they've lost between 40 and 60% of their initial carbon. So that's where we've got a big gap. It's sort of like we've got a bucket that's half full, so we can fill it up. Yeah, but with the grasslands, they're nearly full anyway, so we can't get much more in the bucket. That's the way I like to explain it.
That's great. That's a perfect thing to end on, actually. A nice image there, a great analogy. So it's been absolutely fascinating. So I'm really sorry we haven't been able to we had loads and loads of questions. We haven't get through all of them, but I'd just like to thank both of you, both Pete and Jagadeesh, for coming along today. It's been brilliant on behalf of the Society, and thanks very much to the audience as well for attending. There's been a bumper number of people joining us online. I'm sure lots of people are going to watch it afterwards. And as you leave, there'll be a quick feedback survey, so do please just complete that as you leave. And as I mentioned, the recording will be on our YouTube channel quite soon, the next couple of days or so, so look out for that. And just to let you know, our next webinar is scheduled to be on the 5th of June, so it's always on a Wednesday, and it's on sustainable farming and agriculture, and it's with Don Lobb, who's a Canadian farmer and a representative from Rothamsted Research. So just keep an eye out on the website for more details on how to register. And I really hope to see you at future BS Cubed events. And in the meantime, thanks everyone, and bye.